Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'd like to introduce Dr. Traci Mann, professor at UCLA, here to talk about her book, Secrets from the Eating Lab.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you all for coming here. I know it's Monday, the beginning of the work week. You probably have your head somewhere else. I appreciate you coming here right now to hear from me. I'm a psychologist, and for over 20 years I've been studying the self-control of eating, basically looking at whether people can resist foods that are right there in front of them. And over the years, I've learned what all psychologists learn quite quickly, which is that when people ask me what I do, I've learned to never, ever, ever say that I'm a psychologist. People immediately assume that I'm a therapist. I'm not. They immediately assume that I study or know something about psychopathology. I don't. But they assume this and start telling me all about their crazy uncle or, worse, themselves. So I don't do that anymore. Now, you guys do not have this problem, right? You get to tell people that you work here and they think that's cool. So it's although maybe they get jealous and cranky and then maybe it all goes to hell after that. I don't know. Anyway, we all have our own problems. You guys don't have that problem. Here's how I deal with my problem. Is instead of telling people I'm a psychologist, I've learned to be a couple steps more specific than that about what I do. So I say that I run an eating lab and do research on the self-control of eating. And whenever I tell people that, they always say the same thing. Not that. Not that ever. Nobody ever says that. Nobody has ever in over 20 years said that to me. Okay, do these people exist? I don't know. Probably, because as a psychologist, I know that all kinds of people exist. Okay, but I think it's probably rare. Okay, and in fact, maybe some of you are this kind of person. I don't know. And don't tell us if you are, because no one wants to know. No one wants to hear it. Anyway, it exists, but it's rare. What everybody actually says to me, and I do mean everybody, without exception, everybody says to me, oh man, self-control of eating, I need help with that. I need some of that. That's what I struggle with. And they all say it as if they're this unique, that they have this unique struggle that most other people don't have, right? All these people thinking that they're alone in their inability to reliably resist foods, they're not alone. They're pretty much everybody. Okay, everybody struggles with self-control. Okay, thin people, fat people, everyone in between. Now, are you guys okay with me using the word fat? We're good? Okay, it's just a word, not a judgment in any way, no valence. It's just a description, because sometimes I use that word, sometimes I say obese, sometimes I say fat. Just want to make sure we're all good. Anyway, okay, so everybody struggles with this. Now, if everyone struggles with this, it's hard to see how this could be the crucial factor that explains who's going to end up thin and who's going to end up fat. And sure enough, there is plenty of scientific evidence that shows that willpower, self-control, these are the same things. I'm going to use those words interchangeably. There's plenty of evidence that willpower plays a much smaller role in people's weight than everybody thinks. Okay, and I'm going to tell you about some of that evidence. But first, let's just think through a situation so that you could actually appreciate why it probably doesn't matter very much. Okay, so here's the situation. Suppose you're in a meeting, okay, and there's one of your coworkers comes in and plops a box of donuts down on the table, and you're all sitting at this table. I'm imagining what meetings are like. I have never actually held a real job, so I don't know what meetings actually are like in the real world. Anyway, this is the picture that I have. Big table, everyone's sitting around it. Somebody comes in with this box of donuts, it's great, except that you are trying to resist having a donut. For whatever reason, you don't want to be eating a donut. Okay, so you're trying to resist it. Now, resisting this donut during the course of this meeting is not just one simple act of self-control, right? This is many, many acts of self-control. You have to resist it now when they plop down the box. And you have to resist it 2 minutes from now when you look up and notice it again, and a minute after that, and a minute after that. And you have to resist it every single time you look up and notice it, which is going to be some combination, some sort of interaction between how exciting the meeting is and how hungry you are. The hungrier you are, the more you will look up and notice it. Now, if you resist this donut the first 19 times, that you look up and notice it, but then you get distracted by something, going on in the meeting or something else. If you get distracted, have a 2-second moment of weakness during which you take one of those donuts and subsequently go on to eat it. If this happens, you do not get credit for those very impressive 19 displays of self-control that you just demonstrated. You have nothing to show for it. Okay, you may as well have had bad self-control, right? For all the good your impressive self-control did for you in the end. You ate the donut, but so did your friend with much worse self-control who ate it on the 5th time that they looked up and noticed it. Okay, so with eating, momentary lapses of self-control basically erase previous successes, and that essentially wipes out the differences between people, except on the extremes. In the extremes, you're still going to see differences, but in the vast middle, you're not going to see a lot of differences. Now, this is not really true with other behaviors, so let's think about another behavior. Let's think about academic achievement. Okay, getting good grades, doing well on tests. This requires self-control. You need to use self-control when you're studying for a test, basically, so that you don't get distracted. And of course, this task is harder than it's ever been for young people, right? We used to sit down with a book to study, and there weren't so many distractions. Now you're studying, you're online. It's a click away to start doing something else, to start answering mail or watching a video, whatever it is. Okay, so you're studying for a test. Now let's say you have a lapse of self-control, right? And instead of studying, you stop and you do whatever, you watch some videos. Okay, maybe this cost you a few minutes of studying, right? Maybe it cost you 5 minutes of studying, maybe 10. That's not great, but importantly, what it didn't do was erase all the studying that had come before. Okay, all the studying you did up until that point is still there. It's still in the bank, right? Your lapse of self-control didn't undo it the way it does with eating. Okay, so eating is uniquely unforgiving of lapses in self-control. Okay, and then to make matters worse, lapses in self-control are also extremely hard to avoid when it comes to eating because we have too many opportunities, right? There's food all around everywhere. There's too many temptations all around us. Certainly true here in your workplace, and temptations everywhere. And lapses, it's too easy for them to happen, and they happen so quickly. There's always enough time to have a lapse in self-control when it comes to eating. So willpower would have to be incredibly strong, right? Nearly flawless to handle that, but it's not. It's actually the opposite. Willpower is fragile. It's fragile and it's really easy to disrupt. So for years, all these years, my lab doing studies where we put milkshakes in front of dieters with the goal of looking at what would help them to resist the milkshake and what would mess them up. And basically, everything messed them up and nothing helped them. Okay, so it's really fragile. Another problem with willpower is that despite what you probably have seen on the cover of magazines, depending if you look at this sort of magazine, there's no evidence at all that people can harness their willpower. I'm actually not sure what that even means, but I know that it's not possible. If that's possible, to know it's not possible when I don't know what it means. There's no evidence that you can grow your willpower or get better at it. All right, so I promised some evidence that willpower doesn't matter so much for weight. So here's some evidence. There's a test they use in willpower research to see how good or bad your willpower is, how good or bad your self-control is. And this is called the marshmallow test. Now, you've probably heard of it. It's very well known. This is not from my own work. This is from other people's work, in particular Walter Mischel. And you leave a 4-year-old kid alone with one marshmallow and tell them that if they can resist it, then later they can have 2 marshmallows. Okay, so then they just see how long the kid can resist the one marshmallow. They actually count up the seconds or minutes that the kid can resist the marshmallow. It's very difficult for some kids, although this guy's doing way better than my kids ever did. No psychologist should ever test their own kid on anything, but when my kids turned 4, I stuck them alone with a marshmallow, and I couldn't even get out of the room before they ate it. And you're about to see how poorly this bodes for them. Sorry, guys, I shouldn't have mentioned you. Anyway, they do the marshmallow test. They see how long kids can resist the marshmallow, and then they come back. So for the examples I'm giving you, they come back 10 years later, okay, and see how they're doing. They look at how long they can resist this marshmallow predicts other outcomes later in their life. So the two examples I'm going to mention here are how well they do on their SAT, okay, and their weight. Okay, and it turns out that, first of all, willpower does predict both of those things. Okay, so how long you can resist that marshmallow at age 4 does predict each of those things, but absolutely importantly, willpower is way, way, way better at predicting how well you do on the SAT than your later weight. In fact, it's 8 times better at predicting your SAT scores than your weight. And to say that more precisely, because that's not totally the right way to say that, willpower explains 32% of the variation between people in their SAT scores. Okay, a full third of the variation between people in their SAT scores can be explained by their willpower, by how well they do on this marshmallow test. But willpower only explains 4% of the variation between people in their weight. 4%. Willpower is supposed to be the thing that matters the most for people's weight, and yet it only explains 4% of the variation in weight. 96% of the variation in people's weight is from something other than willpower. Okay, now to not get overly complicated, just forget all that. I'll say it a different way. Here's my simple, but I'm not gonna lie, slightly obnoxious way of remembering just how unimportant self-control is when it comes to weight loss or maintaining weight loss. Now, to appreciate this, you first need to realize that diets don't work in the long run for the majority of dieters. Okay, so we reviewed all the long-term studies of diet, studies that looked at people who went on diets and followed them for at least 2 more years. And what we found is that by about 3 years after starting a diet, the average dieter has regained everything they lost but 2 pounds. Okay, so basically they've gained it all back. All right, so diets don't work in the long run for the majority of people. And I've seen the number 5% as the percent of dieters who actually keep weight off in the long term, or keep a lot of weight off in the long term. Okay, so the minority of people do that. Now here's how you know self-control doesn't matter all that much when it comes to weight. There's a person who is in this special minority of 5%, this 5% of people who have taken off a lot of weight and kept it off. And that person is Bill Clinton. He became a vegan. He lost a bunch of weight and kept it off a very long time. That's great. Go Bill. I'm a fan. I voted for him. But this is not a person who most of us associate with having good self-control. He is known, and I hate to say this on something that's going on the internet, but this is a man whose trademark is that he had no self-control. That's his thing. Okay, but it doesn't matter, okay? Because self-control is only slightly related to weight and weight loss. You know, if you've struggled to take off weight, if you've struggled to keep off weight that you lost, it is not because you have worse willpower than everybody else. It's not because you have a weaker will. It's not because you have less self-control. I'm saying that over and over in lots of different ways because it's an important point that I want people to remember. Okay, if you can't keep weight off, it's not because you're weak. It's not. So what is it because of? Well, before I answer that, let me ask you guys a question. Do any of you know someone who can just eat whatever they want and not get fat? Right? You do. Let the record show. People are all nodding or raising their hands. We all know people like this, and they don't even exercise, right? And you've probably never even thought about what that means, aside from the fact that there is truly no justice in the world. But aside from that, you've probably never thought about what that means. Some of you might even be the person that I'm describing. And again, keep it to yourself. Don't share it. Don't share it with the room. Just a little pointer. Now, you know what else exists is fat people who don't eat that much but are still fat. Okay, now, for the longest time, obesity researchers just flat out denied that this kind of person existed. When they did studies where they had people record everything they ate for days or weeks or months even, they'd find plenty of fat people who weren't eating all that much. And the majority weren't eating a lot, weren't eating a ton of food the way people would assume. And they would also find fat people in their studies eating even less than some of the thin people in their studies. Now, when obesity researchers were faced with that kind of evidence, what they concluded is that the fat people were lying. It was so harsh, just outrageously harsh, just above crazy. They're not lying. The lie is the thing that we've all been taught as the gospel. The lie is that anyone can get skinny, and all you need to do to get skinny is to exercise off more calories than you eat. We've all been told that. But if that were true, how could we have thin people who eat so much and never exercise without getting fat? How could that exist? It does exist. How could it, if that were true? We couldn't have fat people who don't eat that much and stay fat. Don't eat that much and not get thin. It wouldn't be possible, but these people do exist. And the reason these things exist, the reason these people exist, is a more appropriate way of saying that, is because your weight is influenced by so much more than just the calories that come in and the calories that you burn off exercising. So I was at an academic meeting recently, just a few weeks ago, and somebody put up this diagram showing all the different things that influence obesity. Just a simple little diagram. Crazy. Luckily, they put up the simple diagram next. Here's their simple one. They even labeled it simple model. And don't need to pay attention or look at this at all, other than knowing this is the simple model. Okay, so in a lot of these functions on this little graph are genetic. Now we know a lot about the genetics of obesity, and originally we learned about it from studies of people who are adopted. And when kids are adopted, you can compare their adult weight with the parents who raised them, who set their eating habits, set their eating environment, and you can compare their weight with their birth parents, who they share genes with. And what you find is that adopted kids, their adult weight is much, much more highly correlated with their birth parents, who again, never met, but they share some genes, about 50% of their genes, much closer to their weight than the weight of the adoptive parents, who again are deciding what they eat most of the time. Okay, so that suggests genes matter more than environment in this particular, for this outcome, for weight. Now we also know a lot from studies of twins. My university, the University of Minnesota, is the home of twin studies. Coincidentally, it's in the Twin Cities, unrelated. It's a complete coincidence. It's seriously, it's a complete coincidence. And they originated the studies of twins, identical twins reared apart, which if you think about it is the perfect study, right? They share 100% of their genes, but have different environments. So you can really separate out genes from environment in that kind of study. And those kinds of studies show the very powerful role that genetics play in people's weight. These are identical twins. Now, these are not identical twins reared apart. I don't have pictures of those. But these are identical twins, again, sharing 100% of their genes. And you can see that in most of the pairs, the weights are nearly identical to each other. They're not all identical. They're not 100% identical, because genes don't explain 100% of what your weight will be, but it plays a large role. These are fraternal twins. They share 50% of their genes, and you see they're not nearly as similar to each other as those twins who shared all their genes. Okay, genes matter. They play an important role. Now, when you say something is genetic, people get this weird idea that the thing is simply coded on one single gene, right? So with weight, people think there's one gene, and that gene says this person will weigh 150 pounds when they're full grown. Okay, that's way too simple, right? In fact, there's over 100 different genes that are linked to obesity that we know of currently. Okay, every year they're finding more and more genes. This graph just shows the number of genes that they found that influence susceptibility to obesity, and they're finding more and more, and at quite a pace. The 2013 to 15, they found a lot of genes. All right, so what are these things that are coded on genes? Well, let's start with hormones. Okay, so the relative levels and responsiveness of dozens of different hormones are coded on our genes, including these hormones of the gastrointestinal system, known as the gut hormones. Okay, and there's a whole lot of these. Okay, so some of these hormones determine how much you need to eat to feel full. Okay, some determine when you're going to feel hungry and when you're not going to feel hungry. Okay, some people might feel full from eating one sandwich. Okay, other people of the same size may need to eat 3 sandwiches to feel full. Okay, they may need to eat 3 sandwiches before their satiety hormone kicks in. Okay, if one sandwich fills you up, you are less likely to overeat. Okay, and it's because of these genetically determined hormone differences. Okay, what are you supposed to do if you need 3 sandwiches to feel full? Are you supposed to only eat 1 and live hungry? Are you supposed to live never feeling sated, never feeling full? You can just consider, think about it later on your own time. If you think it's fair or appropriate for us as a society to expect some people to never feel full, to always feel hungry just to achieve a certain weight, okay, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's okay. Now, another thing hormones influence is which foods you like and which foods you want. Okay, how palatable you find different foods. If you've ever been pregnant, you've experienced this. If you've ever been pregnant, you know that this has to do with hormones. When I was pregnant, all I wanted to eat were apples. Apples, normally, who could care about apples? Normally I wanted ice cream, cookies. But when I was pregnant, I had no interest in those things. All I wanted were apples. Hormones clearly have something to do with that food preference. Okay, so for some people, it's going to be much easier to resist ice cream than it is for other people. Okay, but it won't be because of their impressive self-control. They might tell you it's because of their self-control, but really it's because they weren't as tempted by it. It didn't look as good to them. It's not calling out to them the way it calls out to some of us. It doesn't seem as appealing. You know how they say it doesn't count as bravery if you weren't afraid to begin with? It's the same thing. It's not self-control if you didn't want the thing in the first place. That's not self-control. That's just a different palette. It's just a different set of genetically based preferences. Now, you know people like this, of course, right? You'll be in a restaurant with them, and when it's time to order dessert, they'll say, oh, no, I could never eat chocolate mousse. That's just, I have people in my own home who say, I could never eat marshmallow peeps for breakfast. That's crazy. Ugh, so annoying. Okay, people, whatever. People have different preferences. So those are hormonal differences. And there's also neural differences, neurological differences. So people differ in their brain's responsiveness to the sight of food and to the sight of different foods. So some people get a big reward response from seeing or eating food. They get a big rush of dopamine. Okay, now you guys know about dopamine, right? It's this neurotransmitter associated with reward, with pleasure, with addiction, right? People get a big dopamine rush from drugs they're addicted to. Okay, so some people get a bigger dopamine rush from certain foods than other people. Okay, so the bigger this response, the bigger the reward response, the more pleasing you find it to have this food, right? The more you crave this food, the more difficult it's going to be for you to resist it if it's present. There's a lot of different neurological functions that influence people's susceptibility to obesity. I'm literally just naming that one, the reward response. There's others too. Actually, we'll mention another one in a sec. Okay, so neurological responses to foods have a genetic basis. And then metabolism. Okay, and of course, your metabolism is genetically based. And you guys all know about metabolism. Your metabolism determines how efficiently you use the calories that come in. And it determines how many calories you burn just doing the job of running the systems of your body. Okay, so some people are going to burn up more of the calories from that donut than other people just while sitting still. Okay, and this is how you can have people who eat a lot and remain thin and people who are fat who don't eat a lot. Okay, you can put people on the same diet, okay, and completely different things will happen to their weight. So this is a graph that shows what happened to 29 different people who were put on the exact same very low-calorie diet for 10 weeks. This is their weight change in terms of the percent of their starting weight. Okay, so each bar is a different person. Okay, and what you can see is that different things happen for different people. Some lost a lot of weight, some lost a little weight, and some gained weight. When you see graphs like this, people say, well, I bet some of those people lied and ate more than they were supposed to. And certainly this is possible on any diet study for the most part, but they've also done studies where the person checks into the researcher's clinic, to a diet clinic, to a hospital, whatever it is, and they live there for the duration of the diet and they only eat the food the researchers give them. Okay, and you still get this wide variation in what happens to people. Okay, now the same is also true for overeating. So this next graph is from a study where researchers first figured out the exact number of calories to give people so that their weight would stay the same. Okay, so they figured that out, and then they overfed each of them 1,000 more calories per day for 100 days, and they didn't allow them to exercise. Okay, so I know, it's like, who's volunteering here? So each bar, again, each bar is a different person. And again, you see this big variation, right? Some people gained as much as 30 pounds in the 100 days. Some gained as little as 10. Okay, and not that we're going to talk about exercise today exactly, but the same thing is also true for exercise. And this graph is from an exercise study where everyone did the same intensity exercise for 12 weeks in the researcher's clinic, in front of the researchers. And some people lost a lot of weight, some lost a little, and some gained. And the reason there's two colored bars is because one is their weight and one is their fat mass. Okay, either way, same point is made, whichever one you look at. Okay, so first point, your weight is based on a lot more than calories in, calories out. And genetically based factors affect so many aspects of it, including things like how tempting a food looks to you, how rewarding that food is to you, how much you crave it, how hungry you feel after eating the same food, and the rate at which you burn up the calories from that same food. If you're a thin person, you're probably on the lucky side of a lot of those, if not all of those. Okay? You're probably on the side that makes it easy to resist food, makes it easy to burn calories, makes it easy to remain thin. If you're a fat person, if you're an obese person, odds are you're on the other side of that, the side that makes it difficult. It seems crazy to blame people for their fatness or be impressed by their thinness. It is way less about them than it seems. Okay, so that was point one. Now point two is where, and there's only 2 points, so don't worry. Point two is where things get really frustrating. Okay, because regardless of where you start out on these biological factors here, regardless of where your genes put you, there is one thing that reliably messes these things up for everybody. And that one thing is dieting. So if you restrict your eating for a while and lose some weight, if your body detects that not enough calories are coming in, all of these biological factors change for the worse. Okay, they change in the way that undermines your effort to keep weight off. And this is why diets don't work in the long run for the large majority of people. So after losing weight, your metabolism changes so that you run your body on fewer calories than before, okay, leaving more left over, unused, to store as fat. So if you eat the same amount of calories that you were eating when you lost weight on your diet, after a while, you'll stop losing weight. You might even start gaining weight. They sometimes call this the plateau. And what will people say? They'll say you had no self-control, right? They'll say you couldn't hack it, you couldn't do it, you were weak. Okay, even though you're eating so little, and probably even eating less than they're eating if they're not on a diet. Okay, so that's metabolism. After losing weight, your hormone levels change. So you're more likely to feel hungry. Okay, you need to eat more to feel full than you used to, than before dieting. So if you eat the same amount of calories you ate to lose weight, you're going to feel even hungrier than you felt then. You probably felt hungry then because you weren't eating that many calories. Now you're even hungrier. Okay, to keep weight off, you have to always be hungry. Okay, after losing weight, also your brain changes. It changes in ways that make food more tempting, and you become preoccupied with food. And there's all kinds of evidence for this. But the earliest kind of evidence for this, and the kind that I think is the most fun, is, okay, that's going to seem inappropriate, but is the kind that you find in journals that explorers leave. Okay, explorers are actually convenient people to study when it comes to the effects of starvation because, unfortunately, explorers do two things. One is that they keep journals where they're very precise, and another is that they die of starvation. So you can read their journals and learn a lot from them. And what you find is they talk about food a lot. They mention dreaming about food. They write about their favorite meals. They write about what the first thing they want to eat is when they get home. All this. This guy on this slide is Robert Falcon Scott. He's a polar explorer. And I feel like he's not so famous in the US. He's extremely famous in England. He's British. And the reason he's not so famous outside of England, outside of his home, is because he came in second. And coming in second for an explorer is like not exploring at all. You know, it's either you're the first one there or you're not. You discovered it or you didn't. His team unfortunately got beaten to the South Pole by 28 days. And unfortunately also, they died on their way back. They starved/froze to death. Polar exploring is insane. I mean, yeah, anyway. I'm an indoor person, so maybe it just seems really extremely extra crazy to me. Anyway, Scott's Journal, and they have a whole museum devoted to him in Cambridge. This is where I was on sabbatical, and it's fun to read his diaries. I mean, okay, again, sounds horrible. They're fascinating. It's not grisly. It's just a very interesting thing. He's extremely tough and not whining in any sense of the word. Anyway, you don't have to be starving to death for these neurological changes to happen. They happen when you lose weight, even just a little weight. They happen when you're depriving yourself of food. And what happens is, and every dieter will tell you this happens, you think about food constantly, you're more likely to notice it if it's there, and eating food gives you an even stronger reward response than before dieting. And this is not ideal if you're trying to keep dieting. Okay, so point 2 is that dieting leads to biological changes that make it incredibly difficult to keep weight off. Just that small minority of people manage to do it. And to do it, they have to go about their lives basically devoted to this, devoted to eating very, very little, to always feeling hungry, and constantly thinking about food, basically fighting against all of these things in these red bubbles here. Now, knowing about these things makes me just screaming mad when people blame dieters for regaining weight they lost. I cannot take it when people say, and this is the thing that people are constantly saying or putting in comments when I talk at other places. They say, well, in the end, they're still the one holding the fork and shoveling it in. It just makes me absolutely want to throttle them. Yes, I will give them this. They are holding the fork. I will give them that. Yes, it's true. But they are holding that fork in a completely different physiological context than someone who hasn't been dieting, right? In this context, they're holding the fork in a context in which their biology has turned on them. And to succeed, they have to battle against all these biological factors. So if you've been dieting, you hold the fork in a context in which your hormones are preventing you from feeling full and causing you to feel hungry, to feel extremely hungry, no matter what you eat. Right, you're holding the fork in a context in which your brain is more likely to notice foods if they're there, pays extreme attention to thoughts of food, and can't really be shaken from those thoughts very easily. And you hold the fork in the context in which your brain is responding to food with a bigger, more powerful hit of reward, with extra pleasure and extra reinforcement. So yes, fine, they held the fork, right? But it's this physiological situation that made them so likely to pick it up. So I thought this information was something people should know, something that people should hear about. So 11 years ago, I wrote a book proposal about why diets don't work, and no publisher would come near it. They did not want a book that started with the 3 words, diets don't work. They just said that is too bad, that is too negative, that's too much bad news. Nobody wants to read bad news. No one's going to read bad news. Forget it. And this absolutely drove me nuts because, first of all, I don't think it's bad news. Okay, I don't think it's bad news to learn that it's not your fault if you regain weight, that it's not your fault if you find it difficult, that it's not because you're weak. It's not a personal failing. Okay, it's because you are a biological human being. Right? Now, secondly, people deserve and want to know what's true. I fully believe this, whether or not it's good news. Whether or not they're going to interpret it as positive or negative, people still want to know what's true. And they should have the right to hear it, and they should have access to accurate information about it. Very hard to get accurate information about diets out there. Tons of information is out there, but most of it is designed to sell you something, generally a diet. So you're not getting accurate information about diets. It seems that this is something people should have access to. And the thing that drove me the most bonkers at the time is that the book that was on top of the bestseller list at the time that I was being told that people don't want to read bad news was a book that I think is like the ultimate in bad news. Anyone guess what that book might have been? Bestseller 10 or so years ago, super bad news, right there in the title. No. My husband guessed Tuesdays with Morrie, which is incorrect. It's this book. He's just not that into you. Come on, that is the worst news. Geez, very annoying, but also extremely disappointing. The only reason I was eventually able to publish this book at all is that for the last 10 years, I gave up on willpower. I gave up on self-control, and instead I started researching strategies for healthy eating that don't involve willpower and that don't involve dieting, ways to get you to eat more healthy stuff. Okay, and the goal of all these strategies, and I'll tell you two of them, the goal of these strategies is to help you reach what I'm going to call your leanest livable weight. Okay, this is the weight at the lower end of your set weight range. Okay, you do have a set range of weights that's basically biologically determined that your body basically tries to keep you within. Okay, your leanest livable weight would be at the low end of that range rather than below it. This is the lowest weight you can be without setting off all those biological changes from the red bubbles, okay, that dieting causes. Okay, those changes, again, they happen when you try to live below that set weight range. So aim to stay within it, but at the low end of it. Okay, now this might not be as low as your usual diet goal. Okay, this might not be the same as your ideal goal weight, but I want to encourage people to think of that as the best weight for them and to aim for that weight, because that's a weight you can maintain without it taking over your life if you do some healthy stuff, and it's a weight that you can be healthy at. Okay, you don't have to get skinny to be healthy, absolutely not. You can be healthy at any weight. Okay, so we need something between this damaging restrictive dieting that's always encouraged and just kind of letting everything go. Okay, and so this is what I'm proposing to be in the sensible middle. Okay, so I'm going to end just by telling you about a couple strategies. Okay, so some of the strategies are basically trying to take advantage of obstacles. They're ways to put obstacles between you and tempting food. Now, these strategies work extremely well because we, and by we, I mean humans, we tend to be lazy. I'm not going to lie, we tend to be lazy. So obstacles usually slow us down, if not stop us entirely. So, for example, there's a study from the Netherlands where they show that if you have a bowl of M&Ms, across the room from where you're sitting, you're not going to eat as many as if the bowl is right there next to you at the table. Okay, if it's 5 feet across the room, you won't eat as many. You'll eat half as many. Having to get up, you have to stop what you're doing. You have to get up. You have to walk across the room. That's a giant obstacle. Turns out you don't need such a big obstacle to cut in half the amount of M&Ms you need. That same study also tested a smaller obstacle. Okay, they put the bowl of M&Ms, instead of right here by your hand, they put it so that you had to reach 2 feet across the table for it. You basically had to extend your arm. And if you had to lean forward a little and extend your arm, you ate just as few as if it was fully across the room. Okay, so this little change made a huge difference, as much of a difference, again, as actually stopping what you're doing and getting up. Does this keep you from eating any M&Ms at all? No, but it helps you eat a lot less. Okay, and eating less seems like a really good goal. Okay, eating less but not none. Okay, none, come on. People need to enjoy their life, you know? I think anything saying you have to have none is not gonna work out. And in fact, I've done research on this with my collaborator, Andrew Ward, years and years and years ago. We forbade our subjects from eating a particular food for 3 weeks, just 3 weeks. And we found that they thought about that food more and desired that food more than if we hadn't forbade them. But here's the crucial thing. We purposely had them pick a food that they felt neutral about. Not something they loved, not something they hated, something right there in that middle area. And still, they thought about it all the time and wanted it so much. Imagine if you're restricting yourself, you're forbidding yourself from eating something you really love. Okay, it backfires. You know, actually Google did a variant to this strategy. I actually mentioned this in the book, and you guys probably know about it, with their M&Ms. They used to have M&Ms all over the place in glass canisters, and at some point they switched them to opaque canisters just to put one more step between you and those M&Ms, just to remove one more bit of temptation. M&M consumption went way down after they did that. So good work, Google. Bravo. But they still have M&Ms. Well, I didn't see any. Maybe they're here. I had Twizzlers on my way in. Yeah. Okay. I was happy about that. Okay. So that's one kind of strategy. Now, another kind of strategy just flips that one around to help you eat more healthy food by removing obstacles that come between you and them. Okay, so removing obstacles between you and healthy stuff. So here's an obstacle to eating vegetables. Big obstacle. Okay, for most people, especially children, vegetables lose to other foods. Most people don't think of them as yummy as other foods. So they lose when they're put in head-to-head competition like they are on every plate ever, anywhere. Okay, that's a competition a vegetable will lose. Here's a competition a vegetable can win some of the time. Okay, nothing. Vegetable versus nothing. They do sometimes beat nothing. And this strategy we've tested, it's what I call get alone with a vegetable. And it's just as easy as this. Eat a vegetable before you put any other food on your plate. Or no, don't do that. Boo. Eat a vegetable while there's no other food in sight. Okay, if all you have is a vegetable and you're hungry, you'll eat the vegetable, but put it on the plate next to the spaghetti and all bets are off. I actually got the idea for this from watching my kids when they were age 3 and 6. We were in a restaurant, a deli, which would normally come and put a bowl of pickles on the table. You've been to places like this. That one day, they were out of pickles, I guess. Instead, they brought a bowl of sauerkraut, a large bowl of sauerkraut, which I think is disgusting. And I like most things. And apologies, foods are culturally linked and whatnot. I don't want to insult anyone's culture. Actually, I have Eastern European relatives. It's my culture too. In any case, I think it's a hard sell for children. Okay, fair enough. No one's hurt or offended by this. My kids, again, age 3 and 6, gobbled up an entire big bowl of sauerkraut with their fingers before I could even turn them against it by giving my opinion of it. So, and disgusting too. Use a fork, people. I mean, Jesus God, there wasn't a fork. In any case, this works with children. We tested it with children. My University of Minnesota colleagues and I, we tested this in elementary school cafeterias. We just gave each student a little cup of baby carrots before they went to the cafeteria and went in and got all their food and sat down with it. Normally, in this school district, only about 10% of the kids were eating vegetables at any given meal. Okay, but once we used this strategy, 5 times as many kids ate the carrots. So it was extremely effective with children. And then I also tested it with the girls in my freshman seminar at the U of M last fall. We had them try this for 3 weeks, just to eat a vegetable first before they got the rest of their tray of food. And they ate more vegetables in that time, but not only that, they also ate fewer calories in that same time period. Even though they weren't trying to reduce their calories, they were only trying to eat more vegetables. But it helps because eating vegetables, if you eat more of them, you're gonna eat less of something else, generally, maybe not always. Okay, so there's 2 strategies, there's 12 in the book, I'm just giving you 2 of them. So the key to all of these strategies, including the other ones, is that they don't have anything to do with dieting or willpower. They will work no matter how little willpower you have. They'll work for all of us with all our crappy willpower. And what I recommend, what I hope people will do, what I think is a sensible solution to the craziness of the pressures for the extreme dieting and the also inappropriate just do anything you want, I think a sensible middle ground is to make these simple changes, these sorts of strategies, and then get on with that. And by doing that, you can reach your leanest livable weight. You will be healthy at that weight. Okay, you'll feel better about yourself and stop worrying about your weight. Get weight back to where it belongs, which is one of the more minor things you think about or worry about, and not this giant thing in your face that causes so much torture to so many people. Okay, so what I'm hoping is that people feel liberated by the message in this book and not discouraged. Okay, because even though it starts with the 3 worst words, apparently, the 3 bad news words, diets don't work, it does end with those really most cheerful words in the whole English language, if you ask me, which are these 3 words, cup or cone. You can't get more cheerful than that. Now, since I'm here at Google, and I love Google, I thought I would let Google have the last word on this topic. So I typed in dieting is not, and Google came back with dieting is not working, not a piece of cake, not good, and absolutely, definitely not the answer. So Google knows all. So thank you, Google, and thank you guys for having me. I will answer any kind of crazy question you want to ask. Or a serious one, whatever. I'm good. Anything you want. I'll leave that there.
I have a small technical question about how you got the 4 and the 32% variation that explains. Is it like a simple linear model and you use the R square or something?
So that came from, I have the citations in the notes section. It came from a study, I want to say by Walter Mischel and Angela Duckworth, where they looked at this very thing and exactly looked at the correlations between the seconds they could resist the marshmallow and then their SAT score or their weight. And they controlled for various obvious confounding variables. And this was the remaining correlation. And then I just converted the correlation to the percent of variance because I feel like people understand that more. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe people would have preferred a correlation. But yeah, that's where it came from. So I just directly off of their published studies. Yeah, they don't describe it that way in their studies.
What's your opinion on strategies like drink water before if you want to lose weight, after if you want to gain weight, and things?
Oh, I haven't heard that drink water after if you want to gain weight. Wow, how does that? I don't know. I don't know how that works. I mean, if you fill yourself up before a meal with some water and that helps you to eat less, if you're prone to eating too much of something unhealthy, that I don't think having a little water is going to hurt you. I'm okay with that. Yeah, seems I'm on board. Yeah, I just don't want people to focus so much on the number on the scale. Yeah, but that seems like a reasonable, healthy thing to do.
So what's a good way to figure out your range, like your healthy weight range? Is just when you start to plateau using healthy weight loss methods or what?
Oh yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Okay, so I get this question a lot, and it's, I think, the hardest question to answer scientifically because there's not research on this that I've seen about how to nail in on this. So what it seems to me, what I've sort of concluded by talking to lots of people about this, is the middle of your sort of set range is going to be the weight. It's going to be the thing you weigh when you've eaten reasonably without dieting, but without binge eating, right? So you've eaten like a really kind of basic amount of food and you've not been totally sedentary, but you haven't like just run a race either. So you know what I mean? So you're really in the dead middle of all these behaviors that we know we're supposed to do. And that's going to kind of be the middle of your range. And another way people notice this is it's a weight that you keep seeming to come back to. You just keep going back there. So whatever you do, you're back there again. Oh, really? I'm back here again? And then you can use these healthy strategies to go, 10 pounds less or what, depending, how much you weigh to begin with. Yeah, exactly. But I can't point it at like a scientific calculation that you can use to get there. That would be cool though. But yeah, that doesn't exist.
So, thanks for coming. But just to be clear, my lack of willpower is not the primary reason why my weight fluctuates, is what you're saying, or my current weight is the way it is. Is that just so that I can tell my wife that?
It's not right. Definitely.
No, I guess in all seriousness, I remember high school. For all of high school, I was probably 160, and then in university hit the freshman 15. I just went to 180 and stayed there. Yeah, I'm a giant. I know. No, but I stayed there for the longest time, even though I tried to do all these things. So how does your theory explain? Is it just my hormones changed in university, therefore, I'm now stuck at this new plateau kind of thing?
The research does show that. Okay, you see lots of diets out there that say they're the change your set point diet. Right, I've seen this exact thing. There's absolutely no evidence that you can lower your set point. But unfortunately, there is some evidence that it can creep upward. It does this slowly over time with large life changes, such as going off to college. When you change your eating habits in a big way, lots of people, when they get married, have very big changes in their eating habits, and you see a creeping upward. Women during menopause, same thing. You see this creep upward. So it can creep.
And then just to follow up on her question, how long should you do this, trying to figure out your set point or set range? Like, how long do you have to eat healthy and not binge eat and not
healthy-ish
diet?
I don't know. Again, there's not a clear science to that. So, I'm going to pull a number out of the sky for you. Would you like me to?
Yes.
Let's say, how about a month? How about a month? That sounds about right? If you do, even maybe a couple weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. Definitely not a huge amount of time. Please.
Did you look at the psychology of stress and how some people eat when they're stressed
Yeah.
and some people can't eat when they're stressed?
It's true. So emotional eating is a big issue in the dieting world. So there's a couple different things about stress. One is that I've done research with my former student, Janet Tomiyama, where we found that dieting itself causes a physiological stress response in your body. This could be another reason why diets don't lead to long-term weight loss. So stress is clearly a problem. What it looks like is that the people who eat in response to stress tend to be dieters. People trying to not eat, people trying not to overeat are the ones who eat in response to stress, whereas people who aren't worrying about their eating are the ones who eat less when they're stressed. So stress, in sum, what it looks like to us is that stress messes up diets. Okay, dieters are more likely to overeat in response to stress, and stress messes things up. So removing stress is a good, important strategy for overall health. I mean, stress is extremely bad for you, regardless of whether or not you're dieting. So removing stress is an important part of being a healthy person, and it will also help you not gain weight. I'll say one more thing about emotional eating, if I may, which is about eating comfort food. This is the strangest thing we ever found in our research, is that eating comfort food doesn't do anything special for your mood. It doesn't do anything different for your mood than eating any other food. And it doesn't do anything different for your mood than not eating food. We tested it in all these different comparisons, and it didn't matter. Everything, even time, made your mood slowly creep upward after we messed up people's moods, and then we looked at this is how you have to do it, and then we looked at what happened when we gave them either their own personal comfort food or a neutral food or food that they like just as much as their comfort food or no food at all. And in every case, their mood improved, but the comfort food didn't make it improve more. So because of this, I've come to believe that comfort food is the thing that you crave when you're feeling bad. It's the thing you want when you're feeling bad, but it doesn't actually do anything special for you. And maybe you think it does because when you eat it, you feel better, but you don't realize you don't have the control group in your head, which is if you hadn't eaten it, you'd have felt better too. Or if you'd eaten something else, you'd have felt better too. So we encourage people to not reach for their comfort food when they're feeling bad, thinking that it's going to make them better in some special extra way. It's not. I would say save the comfort food, save that particular food for when you're happy and can really enjoy and appreciate it. But you don't really need an excuse to eat those foods. You can eat them when you wish. Just don't justify them thinking it's going to make you feel better, because no, it's not. I mean, it's not going to make you feel worse. Don't go there. It's not going to do that.
Hi. So I thought the twin study, not the twin study, the adopted child study was really interesting, how they found that they were more like their biological parents than the environment that they were brought up in. And I was wondering, like, when they compared to the biological parents, if they compared, like, with those parents at that kid's age, or, because, like, obviously parents are normal people too. They change, like, their set point changes over time. If, like, that makes a difference, because I do know, like, some people, like, things like bone structure, metabolism, like that's all influenced by your parents and stuff. But if it was, like, the parent at that child's age or the parent at the current age.
It's true. So those are studies done, I want to say Sweden, but I could be wrong, Scandinavian type countries that keep these amazing, immaculate birth records. And what those studies were able to find was that parents' weight when the child was born, and then they also went back and were able to track these people down because of these amazing records, and then get their current weight. So it was their full-grown adult weight for both sets of parents. Yeah, it's crazy. It's so cool that they can do that.
Well, okay, if there's no more questions, I'd like to thank Dr. Mann again for coming. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.